Edric stoked the flames, sending sparks up into the jungle canopy, and painting their campsite with a lurid orange light. She watched as Haalu flexed against the ropes tied around him, gritting his teeth and perspiring with the effort to break free and make a run for it. But there was absolutely no way he was breaking Kale's knots. 12 years a sailor on some of the finest run Aldean ships guaranteed his knots. As she watched, she noticed what she first took to be a vein on his neck, and then saw it squirm and slither, something just beneath the surface of his skin fighting as frantically as he was to get out. Her mind drifted swiftly from Haalu to the Gorum, to the Carver, and all the horrors he had inflicted upon the galaxy. It would seem that the Master had more than one of the Carver's horrible little toys in his pocket. She could feel both her stomach and her priorities turning.
Edric, put some tea on. This is going to be a long night for some of us.
Welcome to Swords Against Madness, an experiment in gonzo storytelling and solo role-playing. I'm playing a solo game of Swords and Wizardry, amplified by other classic role-playing games like Traveller, and accompanied by solo role-playing tools like the Mythic Game Master emulator. First I play the game, then I turn it into a psychedelic sword and planet audio drama for your entertainment. Swords and Wizardry is based on the original 1974 through 1977 rules to Dungeons & Dragons. It is trippy, fast-paced, and lethal, just the way I like it. There will be no protection for player characters when the dice decide that their number is up. But I do keep the story PG, or at least what passed for PG in the 1980s. If you didn't see it in Temple of Doom, Goonies, or Gremlins, you won't hear about it here. So reload that three-bladed sword. Get comfortable in your studded leather kirtle or your chainmail bikini. Fire up the wizard band. It's time to get weird. Miria toyed with the dagger, trying to look as hard and cruel as she knew how. In the courts of her homeworld, noble women had to play the psychopath once in a while just to get things done. She always hated that role, but now it might suit her well. Burl and Raxton exchanged nervous glances at the far side of the fire. Good. At least she was convincing. Inwardly, her guts were churning at the thought that she was going to have to interrogate this being. She reached out to talk to the all-knowing.
My grandfather used to say never bluff, but I'm not sure what else to do. I don't know if I have what it takes to make him talk.
The Haalu entity does not need to speak. He only needs to think.
Miria rolled that around in her mind for a moment, as she met Haalu's gaze and carefully picked some leaf litter out from under her fingernails with the blade's tip. A smile crept across her face that made Raxton cringe. She got up and slowly moved down to Haalu, driving the point of the dagger into the soil near his face so that he could see his reflection in the steel.
Okay, Spacebait. I'm tired and I have no patience. You're going to tell me all about the Master, or I can just rip it from your mind.
For a moment, Haalu's hard, cruel exterior melted. She could see a hint of fear, a twinge of doubt. And then it hardened again as he set himself in preparation for whatever she was about to do. I'm not going to tell you anything. But already she could hear his thoughts begin to reel, focusing on everything he mustn't say, reminding himself of the details that shouldn't leak out. She could feel the all-knowing reach out and touch his mind.
He's thinking about the Master's home, his mates, family, an enemy. I will share all of his thoughts with you.
Haalu's mind was a black and turbulent pool. She felt herself plunging in, and then being pulled under. A tempest of terror and memory. She suppressed the urge to scream. "5 years ago. Haalu wiped another gout of sweat out of his eyes as the fever rocked his body. He couldn't remember anymore. Had the fever been there before or after the injury? He looked down at his left arm and saw that it had gone black in places. Aben had done him after all.
Couldn't even kill me right, you stupid bastard.
He spat on the unmarked grave slowly being consumed by the jungle, and watched as the ship pulled out of the cove.
That's it then. Left to die. Suppose I earned it, didn't I?
He kicked the grave for good measure. Not that it mattered, but he could remember now. He'd been feverish the night of the fight. And thirsty. So damnably thirsty. If anything, the pounding in his head had gotten far worse after the grog. But he drank it anyway, anything to distract from how wretched he had been feeling. He'd been ill, he'd been wretched, and he'd been feeling loose in the way that only grog could. It would have been a lie to say he wasn't spoiling for a fight that night. Aben had been set to guarding the captives. Most were men, officers who could be ransomed or sailors who could be put to work in the right place. But here on Nar they'd lucked into a few pretty island girls to toss in the cage too. And some of those halflings too, though in his estimation those little rats were worthless. Aben had been guarding the pens that night, and he knew if he so much as eyeballed the girls he could get into a good fight. Aben didn't take a breath without the captain's say-so. They'd swapped their unpleasantries. And then Haalu had started making as if he was going to go for the prisoners. Aben had got up, and he'd shoved him. And soon enough there were knives drawn, and then there was the sport he was really after. Fists and teeth and mud and sweat. He wasn't at his best, but his best had still been better than Aben's. And before the crew had been able to intervene, Haalu had managed to fracture the man's skull with his bare hands. Then he could go find a place somewhere in the ruins to lay down and pass out happily. That morning he'd awoken savage, ill-tempered, drunken, and ready for another round. There wasn't even a twinge of regret as he heard the captain call out a bounty on his name. A quick hanging he didn't think would make him feel any worse. But the damn fools had never caught him. They'd taken away their prisoners and set sail, leaving him for the jungle to take. Now he leaned against a ruined wall, shaking, his arm alternating between numb and hot. The ruin he leaned against still had a door, and he noticed not missing the irony of the great X painted across it. This village had been wiped out by some kind of strange plague years ago, and now was the perfect place to hang out for a while you careen your ship. The captain had, of course, forbidden them from looting the buildings, but he'd gone in sure enough. Surely, he had thought, the fumes and spirits that had taken this place no longer lingered on the air here.
One more bad decision in a whole lifetime of them. Guess I best find a good place to lie down and die.
He headed inland. Here, mounds of kudzu showed where buildings had once been. Only a vague hollow showed where once a grand street had run up the middle of the town. The jungle was greedy and ate quickly. No matter how far he staggered away from Aben's grave, he couldn't escape the charnel smell. And then he realized it was him.
Perhaps I'm dead already and don't even realize it. A walking corpse. It's a nice enough place to haunt.
Haalu's mentations were cut short by a rustling sound in the underbrush.
Well, come on then. Come and finish me off, whatever you are. Let's find out if I'm living or dead already.
Haalu was ready to die to a boar's gore or some jungle bear tearing him to pieces. At least he'd go down fighting. Or, that's what he told himself in his fevered state. But then he got a good look at the threat. The thing that crawled from the underbrush was a pale green, fleshy like some kind of worm, scuttling on far too many legs. The newcomer regarded him with huge, milky eyes, and what at first he took for a long, wrinkled, drooping nose slowly unfolded into a cluster of hooked tentacles, in the midst of which was a gigantic beak. The Carrion Worms. He'd heard the stories, same as everyone else, found ripping apart corpses in shipwrecks. To be touched by one was to go numb all over your body. The worms didn't care for fresh meat. They liked their food pickled, but they had no problem rendering a man helpless and dragging him out to lie in the sun and the surf until he was more to their taste. And of course he'd heard the tales of how these creatures would sometimes take small bites off of a still fresh meal. A slow, miserable, agonizing way to go. The opposite of what Haalu wanted right now. Hideous imaginings of laying out here in the jungle, in the heat, as something nibbled off his arm. That was too much even for a man who'd considered his fate sealed. Haalu spat, turned, and ran, and the horrible thing, with the sound of its many legs clattering, chased after him. Dizzy and feverish, Haalu knew he couldn't run from this thing very long. Some dim part of him, however, was aware of the fact that the islanders had basements, places to hide. Maybe one with a hatch small enough that he could get in, and the worm couldn't. He crashed through ruin after ruin, looking for some sign of an entrance, some place where the kudzu had consumed the basement hatches. All the while, hearing the thing slithering over walls and under bushes behind him. And then, for once, the gods at least sneered, if not smiled at him, as he saw a hole in the floorboard of some dead fisherman's shack. He threw himself in and rolled, his back crashing against cobblestones. As the wind was knocked out of him, the dizziness surged, and for a moment he passed out. When he woke, it was to the sight of a mass of yellow-green tentacles dripping with sludge questing for him, only inches above where he lay. Drops of thin amber fluid dripped on him, and where they touched his skin, he could feel it go completely numb. Shaking, he somehow managed to get hold of the knife still in his belt and slashed out, cutting the tip off of one of the tentacles. The creature let out a shriek, and then the tentacles pulled away. When the worst of the dizziness subsided, Haalu pulled himself to his feet, fell down a couple of times in the attempt, but eventually staggered over to a shelf, where he found to his delight a few jars of grog. They would probably be spoiled by now. But what was a rotten stomach to a dying man? He was already buzzing when he finally heard the sound that told him that he was not alone. He cursed and turned, drawing his knife, hoping he could at least cut away a few more of those tentacles before the creature got him. But what he saw wasn't the milky, dome-like eyes of the Carrion Worm, but rather a pair of shining glass lenses staring at him through the dark, and a curious pale leather beak protruding from beneath them.
Put it away, pirate. You're in no condition to use it anyway.
I don't know who you are, but I promise you'll have a hard time taking it from me.
That I very much doubt.
In a blink, the masked man was upon him. Haalu swore he hadn't seen him move. One moment he was at the far end of the basement, the next he had a hand on Haalu's throat. And he was so strong for such a thin man. He felt the sinews of his wrist beginning to tear as the man twisted his arm and made him drop the knife. And then suddenly he was up in the air and then down again with a crash as the man lifted him and slammed him to the floor. He let out a gurgle as he felt the skin on his tender arm break.
Enough! I give! What do you want from me?
You are sick, and I am a doctor. I should very much like to heal you, and in the process of doing so, we can learn so much together.
The strange man reached into his pouch and pulled out a clear glass jar in which a clear, tentacled thing writhed and squirmed. A black leather-gloved hand reached into the jar and pulled the squirming thing out. He dangled it thrashing above Haalu's face.
Allow me to introduce you to my assistant. His name is Fritz. I made him myself, the first of his kind. And he and you will get to know each other very well in the coming days.
Get that thing away from me! Who are you? What is this?
The details of who I am are not terribly important to you. If you need a name for me, you can share the one that Fritz gives me. You may call me Master.
And with that, he dropped the squirming thing on Haalu's face. Haalu attempted to scream, giving the creature an opening as it quickly slithered down his throat. Several days later, Haalu found himself standing on the same cliffside overlooking the ocean, one foot resting on Aben's grave. Behind him, the doctor was messily dissecting the Carrion Worm, extracting its venom glands, learning about its brain. Things well beyond his comprehension. It was right, he thought, that he should call this strange man Master. And his new companion Fritz squirmed reassuringly in his guts as it ate the last of the corruption that had been streaming through his blood. He took a deep breath of the ocean spray and felt more alive than he had since he had been press-ganged by pirates 20 years earlier.
Are you ready to help me with my next project, Haalu?
I am, Master. Yes.
Good. Come over here, grab a blade, and let's begin.
Now this is a matter of supreme importance.
Welcome to Stories from the First Watch. This is both a solo game and an experiment in storytelling. The story and the character's actions will unfold upon the roll of the dice. They are in control.
Be careful what you say, or you have no tongue at all.
Follow the exploits of a party of adventurers forced to take on a dangerous mission on behalf of a shadowy organisation.
Just be careful when insulting minor lordlings. Their egos can be dangerous things.
Available on Podbean, Spotify and Podchaser. And come and listen to more Stories from the First Watch.
Once my party had Haalu prisoner, I was faced with a dilemma. Haalu was a fanatic, a lunatic. There was no way that the character I had depicted so far was going to give up his information easily. So how do you get it out of him? Well, mercifully, Miria, at least temporarily, has the ability to read minds. So I figured we could use that. But I did want to stick to the limits of ESP as it is usually expressed in Dungeons & Dragons. Namely that you are aware of the existence of minds. And if you focus on one mind, you can hear its surface thoughts, and only its surface thoughts. That isn't easily enough to get the information you need out of the Master, at least not without a little trickery. Now, I'm a lifelong fan of the show Babylon 5, and it always did amazing things with how it depicted psychics in the series. In one of my favorite episodes, the psychic Talia Winters is called upon to rescue a hostage. While in that series, Talia could have gone into the character's brain and ripped out the information she needed, that would be a crime, one with an unbelievably stiff penalty. So instead, she used a very clever trick. As she went over the verbal contract that psychics in that series had to give before they could begin reading minds, She mentioned that the person should be careful what they think of, so that the psychic does not pick up on personal information. For example, they should not think about where the hostage was kept, which of course immediately got the hostage taker to think of where they were hiding their hostage. In this way, Talia skirted the law and kept to the rule about only reading surface thoughts. This isn't the first time I've used that scene as inspiration when playing D&D. But in this case, I had Miria mention all the things she was going to force Haalu to think about, and in the process she got his mind racing. To be sporting, I even gave Haalu a series of saving throws to hold certain information back, and unfortunately for him, he couldn't manage to keep a single thing to himself. Miria was able to extract the location of the Master's hideout, where he was getting the Gorum, some sense of what he and his handmaidens are capable of, and where he learned the Carver technology. I also decided to ask Mythica a bunch of questions about who Haalu was before he became the Master's henchman. And what I got after a series of questions was that Haalu wasn't native to Nar, although many people might have thought he was. He had come here to, as Mythic put it, steal community. He was one of the slavers. This was amazing good luck for me because it meant that Miria could at least get some outdated information on the slavers. It also necessitated me coming up with a background for Haalu as to how he left the service of pirates and became the Master's servant, for which I decided I would simply get myself involved in daydreaming. The story you just heard was that moment when Haalu left the pirates and became something far more terrible. And as I mentioned a couple of episodes ago, Haalu has been transformed by the Master, but he hasn't been given any special powers that would help him in combat. Given we know that the Master is a healer, and given that we know he dabbles in genetic engineering and monster making related to the lore of the Carver, I came up with the idea that he had implanted something in Haalu. Nothing that made him a better combatant, but might have made him immune to disease, improved his healing, maybe even given him some protection from poison, nothing that would have come up in the battle. And so the idea that he had a symbiote was interesting to me, because it meant that the symbiote might have value or powers, or might be a part of another encounter later. And of course, I'll never turn down an opportunity to sneak a little more Jack Vance into this game. And so we have Fricks, and while I'm not entirely sure about all of his behaviors and all of his abilities, it seems very likely that symbiote-infected spies for the Master will be a going concern in the future. And so I've added them to a number of my thread tables and special encounter tables. So I managed to get a ton of information out of Haalu, and in the process given Miria the means to follow up on a number of vendettas she has. But what's next? Well, dealing with Haalu is. I have been playing D&D for 40 years now, and while I had my murder hobo phase, I'm interested in having characters who aren't monsters. And nothing quite defines you as a player and defines your character so much as what you do when you have prisoners. So let's see how that works out. Miria awoke in a sweat and choked down some bile that had risen in her mouth. She had lived through all of the darkest moments of Haalu's life in fits and starts, witnessed the horrors of what the Master did. There was a real danger, for a moment at least, that she might lose herself and become something closer to Haalu. She had to let go of the memories and hold only the information. She took a ragged breath and exhaled his monstrous life. She became aware that Edric was mopping her brow, smiled, and gently pushed his hand away. Raxon and Burl, orange ghosts in the embers of the fire, watched her with concern and caution. Even without the gift of telepathy, she could read the question in Raxon's mind. She looked at Haalu and asked it to herself.
What am I going to do with him?
She reached inward to the all-knowing.
I need to know. What is he planning to do now?
He is thinking about a hidden place, a ruin, a place the Master cannot find him. He is afraid to return.
Do we have to fear revenge from him?
Unknown. I do not think he knows that himself.
One more question as Miria tightened her grip on the dagger.
If I set him free, will he return to piracy?
Unknown.
Miria pulled herself to her feet slowly, her body aching from the ordeal of her most recent trance, sick with the poison of unknown consequences, her knuckles white on the dagger. Miria, wait. Raxon leapt up quickly, his chest heaving. I know who he is, and I have a sense of what he's done, but he's not a Gorham.
No, on some levels he's far worse than a Gorham. The Gorham don't choose what they do. It's wired into their heads. But this one, he keeps making choices.
I don't know if we have the right to make this choice.
I don't think we have a choice but to make this choice.
He's not a Gorham, damn it!
Either come over here and stop me, or let me get on with it.
Miria grabbed the supine Haalu by the hair and touched the blade to his throat.
You said it to yourself once. You've made a lifetime of bad choices. You always expected to get yourself killed by a stupid one, didn't you?
Just get it over with.
Miria then gave him a swift knee to the groin, causing him to double over in pain as she rolled him over and then cut him free of Kale's knots.
This is your last chance. Start making some good decisions. If I ever hear that you've hurt another person, I will hunt you down. And if you ever join another pirate crew, I will blast you from orbit. Do you understand me?
In his confusion, Haalu took his first handful of steps slowly. The sound of Miria charging an electrolaser was enough to get him moving. He crashed through the woods and into the darkness. Once the All-Knowing gave her the sense that Haalu was out of range, she put away the laser, then flipped the dagger over and handed it handle first to Raxon, leaving him to make of the events what he will. She'd always hated playing that role. Swords Against Madness is played, written, and performed by Brian C. Rideout. Production and editing are done by Stormhead Productions. This episode features the voice talent of Jon Cohen from Tale of the Manticore as the All-Knowing. It included the song Ominous Tone by Universe Field, licensed through Pixabay. The opening theme was King Edward by Mr. Smith, licensed Creative Commons by Attribution on the Free Music Archive. Bury It Deep by Alana Jordan, licensed through Pixabay. Dark Intentions by Universe Field, licensed through Pixabay. Combat Cookie Tin by Jon Cohen, used with permission. Dark Magic Music by One Tent through Pixabay. And Serpentine by Solar Flare, licensed Creative Commons by Attribution through the Free Music Archive. Reign of Shadows, Ego Mi Inaliendo Mundo, and Eternal Nightmare Subspace Conclusion were all created using the Suno AI by Brian C. Rideout, with lyrics by Brian C. Rideout. I can't thank Jon from Tale of the Manticore nearly enough for all the support he's shown me over the last few weeks. Jon, you are a true killer of giants. I am also blessed to be able to read a podcast review today. This one's from Elena Menkina. The world holds surprises, and the story continues to entertain. I also like how his son has contributed to the story without making it too silly. Elena, thank you so much. At times I'm worried that I'm going a little overboard with things like Psychic Squid, but I keep hearing from fans who enjoy what my son throws in there, and I intend to keep it up. Thanks so much. If you want to see maps, spells, monsters, and character sheets, you can find them at swordsvmadness.stormheadproductions.ca. And if you want to get in touch with me, email brian@stormheadproductions.ca. Or get in touch on X @swordsvmadness. And until next time, play hard, roll high, and think weird.